Well, hi. Welcome to Itasca Waters' Practical Water Wisdom Series. I'm Brian Whittemore, your host for today. We have a very important subject to discuss in this month's Water Wisdom: living with zebra mussels in your lake, a cautionary tale. We will get to that in just a moment. But first, let me tell you a little bit about Itasca Waters. We are a local, volunteer, nonprofit headquartered in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, with members who either live and or vacation in our area. Our goal is to continue to find interesting ways to educate residents about how to keep our water clean for both the environment and the economy. We've been teaming up with like-minded people and organizations for 16 years now. You can read about those projects on our website at itascawaters.org. If you find you have an interest, please consider joining us and becoming a member or a volunteer to help support programs like this. And we thank our partners shown here on your screen for their support in producing this program. Today's program will be a little different than previous ones. Rather than one presenter, we have 4 citizen scientists who decided to learn all about and do battle with zebra mussels and other harmful aquatic invasive species. They've agreed to speak with us today about what they have learned. Then they will answer questions from you. To submit a question, you only need to click on the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and type in a brief question. And you can do this anytime. We will read the questions on your behalf. We will not be using the chat function today. This program is being recorded and will be available for viewing online through our website, itascawaters.org. We value your opinion a lot, so please click on the survey link, which will be on screen at the end of today's program, or complete the survey that will be sent to you by email. And we thank you for your help. Now, here are our presenters, and I ask each of you to raise your hand, turn on your camera as I introduce you. First, Megan Weber lives in Big Lake, Minnesota, and is an aquatic invasive species extension educator at the University of Minnesota. Megan's experience with zebra mussels stems from her previous roles at a water district in California, where she was responsible for response planning and the zebra mussel monitoring program. At a private company working on the development of a control tool for zebra mussels, and at her current role, where she regularly works with passionate Minnesotans concerned about the impacts of zebra mussels on their favorite water bodies. Next up, Kevin Zahler lives in the southwest area of the Twin Cities on Lake Minnewashta in Carver County. Kevin's water work is broad and includes AIS detector, Minnesota Water Steward, MPCA SECI detector, zebra mussel detector coordinator, and spiny water flea monitor on Lake Minnewashta with MACER. He is on the board of directors with Lake Minnewashta Preservation Association and a member of the Carver County WMO Advisory Committee. Next is Phil Rollins. Lives on Bay Lake between Garrison and Deerwood in Crow Wing County. Phil has been working on Bay Lake AIS issues for about 12 years. He serves as president of the Bay Lake Improvement Association from 2018 to 2021 and still occupies a position on the board. In addition to the zebra mussel infestation, Bay Lake has been dealing with and treating Eurasian milfoil for over 25 years. Our 4th panelist is Phil Thompson, who moved to Sand Lake in Deer River, Minnesota, after retirement from IBM in 2008. In 2009, he became a member of the Sand Lake Property Owners Association Board, where one of the main objectives was to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species. He worked with the local DNR and Itasca County AIS to provide education to the public, as well as 8 resort owners regarding AIS. He helped the Lake Association receive several grants to assist in the purchase of educational material and coverage for the public access. And finally, Hillary Sorensen has agreed to moderate the presentation segment of our program today. Hillary is an assistant professor of extension at Minnesota Sea Grant and we're very grateful for her participation today and her skills in leading the conversation. Okay, Hillary, it's all yours.
Thank you, Brian. Welcome, everyone. Special welcome to our panelists. So we're going to go through a series of questions today. We'll hear from all of our panelists on these questions. And right now, I'm going to start with Phil Rollins. I'm going to kick this first question to you, and then everyone else chime in if you have anything to add. So the first question is, what advice would you give lakeshore owners and lake association members if they're dealing with a newly infested lake?
First of all, I would say don't panic. We've all read about the horrible things that can result from an infestation. We discovered zebra mussels in our lake in 2019, and we feel like we're reaching their limit in the lake now, and it hasn't been as bad as we thought it might be. So don't panic. I would say very important to communicate with your members if you're part of a lake association, to prepare people for it. MASIC has a great flyer, which we developed with them for distribution to members, which explains the ins and outs of all this. But I think communicating with the members on your lake is really important so that they're not surprised. But it just hasn't been as detrimental to life on the lake as we expected. So don't panic. Learn about what it will be like. We'll talk about that more today, and communicate with your members. Those would be my top choices.
Thank you, Phil.
So I agree with what Phil said. Don't panic. On the other hand, the zebra mussels are a big detriment to our water quality. You know, some people view it as improving the clarity, but they're also consuming a lot of what supports the life of the lake. So the little microbes that small fish feed on and so on. So I think the biggest thing for me is to support the research, especially what University of Minnesota MASIC is doing, along with a lot of other organizations. I think the research is our hope for the future. That I believe that there's going to be a solution in the end, and we need to support that.
Thank you, Kevin.
Also working with the local DNR and the county AIS on education and is very important. And they're very good at helping you with rules and regulations as far as infested lakes go.
I think the three before me have given really solid advice. And I really love Phil's start with don't panic. I think as someone who educates about zebra mussels and tries to share information about prevention, we always have to walk this line between having it be something that people are concerned about and are motivated to take preventative actions for, but not overstating a threat and leaving people terrified and devastated when they're in their lake. So it's certainly a species of concern, and it's not something that, we want to see spread from lake to lake. But it doesn't also mean, the end of the lake. And it doesn't mean the end of your ability to enjoy the lakes that you live on or recreate on. It might mean just some changes in the way that you use it. But I really love the don't panic, and I think you'll get some other good practical tips through some of the other questions that I know are queued up and already kind of coming through Q&A too.
Wonderful. Thank you all very much. So Phil Thompson, I'm going to start with you for this next question. This builds a little bit off of that concept of people who are on a newly infested lake or a lake that does not have zebra mussels yet. What surprised you the most about living with zebra mussels?
I like the don't panic also, but one of the things that we found is surprising is how quickly they multiply. I think one zebra mussel after 1 year can reproduce, and they produce hundreds of thousands of villagers or baby zebra mussels. And so that was the most surprising thing. But the other thing was how quickly the water cleared up. It was quite amazing. And then some of the other dangers that we were supposed to be facing, like piled up zebra mussels on beaches, hasn't happened. So really, the main thing is how quickly the water cleared up and how quickly the zebra mussel spread.
I've been surprised at the inconsistent dispersion in our lake. We've set out zebra mussel detectors all over the lake for the last 5 years or so and collected them at the end of the year. It's a partnership with MESA, and the dispersion is really uneven, and we just don't have any idea why. So that's been sort of surprising. Also, we have 450 cabins on the lake, about 1,000 members in those cabins. And I've been the face of this on our lake for quite some time, and I haven't received a lot of pushback or complaints or anything from members. It's surprising that we've had this thing for 5 years, and there haven't been riots at the local restaurant and bar, which is just I just ask people about it and say, well, it's not a big problem. And then I would also say one thing we haven't touched on is the clear water for us has really increased the load of the weeds in the lake. And we have a big milfoil problem, but boy, when the water's low, like it may be this year, and we have clear water down to 20 feet, we really get an increase in the weeds. That's probably the most, that's probably the biggest issue that we have around the clear water and the zebra mussels, quite frankly.
So on Lake Minnewashta, we've had zebra mussels since 2018. There's some earlier events where in the launch area where they were eradicated. So really from 2018 on, so 6 years so far. And it just last year I started seeing zebra mussel shells accumulate on the shore. I've also agree with what others have said. They're pretty dispersed. We don't have zebra mussels layering the substrate. They attach to hard surfaces, in particular rocks and clams. They don't even attach to our detector until the fall. I think that's because that's when the babies, the villagers, start to attach to a new surface. So they don't really show up until the fall. So the mature ones, we're only seeing attached to hard surface and also to weeds, surprisingly to weeds. I guess that's a hard surface also. So our sandy bottom is not littered with zebra mussels.
Curiously, we don't find them attached to pipes, dock pipes, but boat lifts, the tubes where it's dark, lots. But exposed pipes, no, from that on, they're steel, they're solid, but not finding many on the pipes.
Same for us. None on the pipes, none on the lift, but on the wheels of both the dock and the lift. So very interesting why they don't attach to the pipes. I don't understand it.
I think we'll come back to discussing this a little bit, Kevin. So hold that thought. Megan, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I'm coming to the panel with a little bit different perspective than Kevin and Phil. As I'm not a lakeshore resident. I live very close. I can walk down to our local lake and have in-laws on the lake, all of which have gotten zebra mussels within the last 2 to 4 years. So it's been something that, I experience on the lakes that I'm closest to and love. But, I work with a lot of folks who live on lakes and specifically with zebra mussels frequently. And the thing that has really surprised me too, or at least has been really interesting, is just how different the experiences can be. And I think you probably heard that in the responses you got from the 3 before me. We've been working on piloting a participatory science project, and Kevin and Phil are a part of that. at their lakes called Zebra Mussel Safari, where folks have samplers that are hanging in the lake and we're getting data back in. We've first been learning how to collect that data. But one of the things that I've noticed is even for lakes that were detected in the same year, so presumably pretty close to like first to introduction, we have one that's been part of the pilot for 3 years and they still don't see zebra mussels on their plates versus other where we can like on some of their plates, it's really painful to hand count because we can get like 1,000 on a plate. So it's just really interesting seeing those differences across the state. And I think that one of the nice things about this project that I mentioned too is that it hopefully kind of helps give us some tools to start to answer the questions about the why along that too.
Thank you. So one of the big concerns we hear a lot is just the sharpness of the zebra mussels. And so one of the questions that came in was, I have grandchildren and pets that love to play in the lake. What can I do to keep them safe from cuts? And Kevin, we'll start with you for this one.
Well, I think we've all heard this, so wear water shoes. But our grandson is here all the time in the lake and he's been very safe. Like I said earlier, we have a sandy bottom, so zebra mussels don't attach to that. They attach to hard surfaces. So far, so good. We haven't had any big problems.
Same thing on Sand Lake. We've had zebra mussel since 2013. And I live on the east end of the lake and I have a sandy beach. So the west winds blow pretty good onto our shoreline. And we haven't experienced, I think, as I said before, any zebra mussels piling up on the sand at all. So we've had nieces and nephews and everybody playing on our beach without any problems.
I see one suggestion would be that if there are stones or rocks in the areas that children are playing in, put on your swim goggles and get down there and just remove those rocks because they're going to attach to them. We have a more of a muddy bottom at our cabin, and I swim a lot. And finally, last summer, I finally got a cut on my foot, and it was from a zebra mussel. It was on a stone. So if you can clear out anything hard that's going to be on the bottom that they might be walking.
We make kind of a game out of it with our grandson and other kids that are here, collecting wet rocks and clams, in particular clams, shucking off the zebra mussels, throw them up in the rocks on shore, and then throwing the clams back in the lake. So they kind of like it. So.
I like that. Make a game out of it.
Yeah, I think like the others have said, I think it'll depend mostly on what the lake shore or the lake bottom is like where you live. In places where there's lots of sand, it's probably not too big a problem. I have gotten cut. It doesn't feel great. I'll say that. It's painful, but water shoes are fine. That's one way to solve the problem. And even in kind of heavily infested lakes, like for example, Mille, I had a girls' weekend there and some of my friends had water shoes and some didn't. It was mostly a sandy spot with some rocks. And I think one got, like one cut, but generally was fine. So if you have a pretty sandy spot, you're probably fine. One of my in-laws, for example, their lake is very rocky. So when we go there, like we'll definitely just all have our water shoes on when we go play in the lake. But we'll still be in there. My kids will be swimming in it. I'll be swimming in it, and we'll be fine with our water shoes.
Okay, Phil Rollins, I'm going to start back with you for this one. This is a little bit more the last sort of broad question, then we'll get into a little bit of details about what people have been doing with these infested lakes. So this question is, have you noticed any difference in the amount of boat traffic since your lake became infested with zebra mussels?
This is a very simple answer. No, none.
Anybody have any different experiences?
No, none at all. I don't think any difference. In fact, I think it's increased. But the clear water brought more people out, I suppose.
Yeah.
The recreation on our lake hasn't changed. I think it's even increased. But the people that are fishing, it's changed for them with the clear water and the food chain has been disrupted because of the zebra mussel. So that affects some of the fishing, certainly, and depending on the type of fish you're after.
That makes sense. All right. Anything to add? So Phil Thompson, we're going to come back to you, starting with this next question. Now we're getting back into some of these details. We talked earlier about what kinds of things zebra mussels attach to, which is a lot of things. Are there any effective coatings that you all have had experiences with or have found that can be applied to surfaces to prevent zebra mussels from attaching?
Actually, the simple answer to that is no, we haven't found anything that works. They seem to attach to everything as we've been talking about, except muddy bottoms and beaches. So I can give you an example of how zebra mussels have attached to a fishing pole that had been underwater quite some time, and somebody snagged it. And every inch of that pole from the handle to the tip had a zebra mussel on it. There was not a spot on there that didn't have a zebra mussel. And we turned that over to the Itasca County AIS for demonstrations. But so they do attach, and no, we haven't found anything that will coat to prevent that.
We haven't either. I did a little reading this morning online, and there is a toxic zinc coating, but evidently it's toxic to everything in the lake, so not recommended. And I read something about some sort of silicone coating, but haven't used it. Don't really know more about it. Only that I read that's an option. You know, the best thing is to put your boat on a lift and get it out of the water for sure.
I think I need to defer to Megan. I know MASORC is researching this, and the coating that's being researched is also possibly will kill the zebra mussels. Do you know more, Megan?
Yeah, I think that's all I was going to add is that it's an area of active research for the Minnesota Aquatic Invasive Species Research Center, and I can find the project link. There's probably some old YouTube seminars that you could view to kind of hear some updates about that project. And I think that's focused on like coatings that you could perhaps like use on the hull of your boat to help prevent attachment there. But as in terms of other, coatings for like docks or things like that, I'm not aware of anything.
I did read the coating summary on the MASORC website, so I did see it there.
So this question is, I'm just going to toss it in there because it's very related to the previous. There was a mention of needing boat lifts. So a lot of people do have boats or pontoons, which are left in the water all summer. On your lakes, have you found it necessary to purchase boat lifts? And if so, how long did that take for that to happen after your lake became infested before you really started to see people using more boat lifts?
We didn't find a big increase in boat lifts. It's pretty nice to have a boat lift to keep it out of the water and the lower unit of the motor. But there's still, on Sand Lake, there's still a number of people, probably the majority, or half and half, that have lifts, and the other half are their boat or the pontoon is still in the water.
And I would say on Bay that 95% of the boats are on lifts. There are very few that are in the water. And I don't really know that that's changed. I think that's been the case for quite a while. I'm sure on some of your lakes you get big storms, and having the boat at the dock in a big storm with waves is usually not a good thing. So I don't think it's changed that much. I do get the question once in a while, so maybe a few people have added lifts, but not much. But it seems to me it's really important, and especially to get your motor, your lower unit out of the water.
My boat is on a lift, and so of course I don't have issues. In fact, like I said earlier, the zebra mussels aren't attaching to the lift either, only to the wheels. As far as a change in number of boat lifts, I don't think it's changed. On Minnewashta, there's maybe 25% that are not in lifts, and unfortunately I really don't know, but I don't think they have a big problem. At least I've not heard about it. The only problem I've heard from other residents is water intakes for their lake pumps for their lawns or whatever, that sometimes they get clogged up.
So I think we want to leave a lot of time for questions that are coming in from the audience. So I'm going to ask one more as part of this panel discussion. And I think Phil Rollins, we might be back to start with you on this one. For the folks that have boats on infested lakes and do transport those boats to other lakes in the area, do you have any inspection tips or advice to help people avoid transporting zebra mussels? Oh, Phil, you're still muted.
One misconception that if you put your lake in an infested boat for the day and take it out, the zebra mussels are going to attach to your boat. Not going to happen. But I think if there's an inspector reviewing your boat, listen to what they're doing or follow them around, and they're going to be the best ones to tell you and show you exactly what to do. But obviously don't transport water. That's the big thing. If you're in an infested lake for a few days and can't get your boat out of the water while it's in the lake, I would take it to a decontamination station somewhere, and they're around, and get your boat decontaminated by DNR or a county, whoever's operating it. But get all the water out, decontaminated, and listen to what and follow. I mean, we have one access, and we have inspectors there all week, every day, all day. And a lot of boat owners just stand back and let it be done and then they drive off. But it's really an opportunity for a learning experience to hear what they're doing, or see what they're doing and hear why they're doing it. I think that's an educational opportunity there.
Wonderful, thanks.
There's a lot of regulations to follow, and they're in a lot of the manuals and fishing guides and things. So that's helpful also.
Thank
So I think clean, drain, dry is really, really important. Inspection is a good thing to have, but what we really need is education of people. And so hopefully through webinars like this, we get through to more people that they need to take responsibility. The big concern to me is not the zebra mussels that might attach to a boat, because you can see those. It's more the villager or I suppose villager that's in the water. And if you can't evacuate all of the water or vacuum it out, there's a good chance you're transporting something to another lake. And so I would strongly recommend that people take steps to get the water out of their boats. And I don't know about all kinds of boats and live wells and things like that. I think there's some difficulty in that, but taking those steps are really important. And the thing about decontamination is it's a free opportunity to get your boat cleaned. So you might want to take advantage of it.
One other thing about the villages is that the zebra mussels need a certain water temperature in order to release those villagers. It's not that they're in the water all the time. If it's not warm enough or it's too warm. So there's a prime time during the season when they're released. And I'm not sure exactly what that is. I think it's maybe around 60 degrees, but if you're in early, it's unlikely you're going to see anything. And if you're in late and the water's cooled down again, probably not. Not that you shouldn't clean your boat anyway, but they're not in there. They're not in the water all the time.
That's true. Actually, they did a study on Sand Lake, and the temp is between 60 and 64 when they're released. So
I would continue to just echo what the group has said. Phil mentioned the decontamination station, so did Kevin, and DNR puts a map up on their website that has live locations once the season gets going, so you can find a decontamination station there. And like Phil said, if you're, doing day use boating, it takes some time for the mussels to attach. So if you're, moving around and, you're not leaving the boat in for like a couple of days, then the chances of one attaching are pretty low. Your risk really is the water. Or you heard the group talk about finding zebra mussels attached to like plant stems. So that's another thing to think about too when you're looking. The plants are an issue too, not only because some plants are also invasive and we don't want to move those, but zebra mussels that can attach on. They're adult, they're a great size, and they're all clustered nicely together. So it's like kind of this prime way to have this reproducing group move from one to another. So paying close attention to like plants that can also get hung up in your trailer is another really great step. But cleaning stations, car washes are all wonderful ways to kind of help reduce that risk too.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for your wonderful discussion on this panel. I'm going to toss things back over to Brian quickly, and then we'll start taking some questions from the audience. Back to you, Brian.
All right, thank you. Very quickly, Megan looked up and is sharing with us the link for what they were talking about. Oops, it just disappeared. John, I'll leave it up to you if you still have that. The chat part disappeared.
Yeah, sorry.
I got it back.
Okay.
It's https:// MAISRC masirc.umn.edu/coatings, COATINGS. And we'll try to do that at the end too, if we remember, so that you guys can grab a pencil and piece of paper. So now let's go back to the Q&A portion of today's program where we get your questions answered. Bill Granges is our usual host, but Bill's not available today. Get well, Bill. Hillary Sorensen has agreed to continue and direct the Q&A. So let's return to Hillary.
I apologize. I'm back. It'd be nice to have Bill, but here I am. Okay, so this part, some of these questions will be directed toward individuals and some will just be generally for the group. The first question up is actually a clarifying question for Phil Rollins. Did you say that 95% of boats on Bay Lake are not currently on lifts? We just wanted to clarify what you said there.
No, a very high percentage are actually on lifts.
Okay, are on lifts. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so this is a general question for everyone. Do you see much green slime on your lakes now? My lake has had an explosion of green slime growing up on the docks, rocks, and lake bottom after zebra mussel infestation. This question's from Steve.
Not for Minnewashta, not at all.
Not for Bay, not that I've seen.
No, we have seen some, but not much at all.
Okay. So not sure what's going on your lake, Steve. might be a different challenge. All right. This next question I think is going to be for you, Megan. The MASIRC website talks about using RNA to treat zebra mussels. How far are we from using that approach?
Yeah, so there is an ongoing project using RNAi, and it's, I'd say, a longer term approach. It's one that I think has promise, but it's still probably in the earlier stages. I know Nick Phelps, the director, was just having a conversation with Kevin and I too, where he was chatting about that, but noted that there's some additional grant funding that's come in to kind of help scale that up. But I mean, I don't think it'd be something where I would say, yeah, watch for this in the next year or two. You've probably have a little bit more time for that to continue to develop and see how that type of treatment can deploy.
Megan, would you explain what it is?
RNAi.
Right.
So the I is interference, so RNA, and I'll find the link for it because I am not a geneticist and don't do genetic control work. So I'll find a link that can maybe provide a little bit better information about that project too.
So this is one of my great hopes, is that this could come through eventually, perhaps not in my lifetime, but eventually. I understand that this is a very difficult issue because the researchers have to be very careful that they're not affecting native mollusks, I guess is the right term. And that's why it's so touchy.
All right, thank you very much for that information. This one, again, this is to all of you. Can zebra mussels move on their own, or do they need to be attached to something moving?
I think they can very easily just float freely in the water in streams.
Is that villagers or villagers or mature mussels are we talking about?
The question just says zebra mussels, so.
So the mature mussels much less likely, I think. The villagers, absolutely. But I think once they're attached, they pretty much stay where they are, although I've read that they can move. But I don't, Megan, maybe you guys know more about this, but I don't think that's likely.
Yeah, they're as adults, they're I think more mobile than people think. But I mean, we're also not talking super long distances either. Their foot, so like the mussel has this tiny little foot inside its shell. So when it wants to move, it could release from the byssal threads. So those are the threads that it's using to attach onto things. So it can release from those, drop to the bottom, and it can kind of scooch along. I mean, it's a small foot. It's a lot of work to move, but they can. Like if it gets too crowded in an area or water quality conditions just become uninhabitable or aren't preferential to them, they could release and try to find another place to settle out. So it's possible. But I think, especially if your question is kind of about longer distances, then we're more talking about like human mediated movement.
I've done a little research on the life cycle of zebra mussels. Maybe I have too much time to waste. And anyway, so zebra mussels can lay, I think, millions of eggs. I'm not sure about that, but a huge amount. And then they're fertilized, and then they become villagers, and the villagers the eggs and the villagers are free floating through the water, and then need to settle on something to mature into the mussel, is my understanding. And I said earlier on about the detectors, where I'm seeing that all of the mussels settling on the detectors are very small, very, very small. And I think that's a result of what's going on with the annual production of new zebra mussels.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. So this is another pretty general question for, I think, all of you. What are the first signs to identify an infestation?
On Sand Lake, one of the resorts found the zebra mussels on their boat lift. And they had notified the DNR, and that was the beginning.
And on Bay, a dead zebra mussel was found, I think, in 2018 on a rock on a beach. That got our attention. And then one of our members found one on a rock off of his dock the following season and reported that to the Lake Association. So we started to see these things. I think it just speaks to the importance of communicating with the residents on the lake about what might be coming so that they are aware and can report and know where to report should they find something early, because there have been a couple of instances where they have been quarantined successfully in small areas and the infestation has been arrested, so to speak. So it can be really important that your lakeshore owners know what to do if they see one of these things.
So that's kind of what the case in Minnewashta, in 2016 and 2017, some zebra mussels were found in the launch area, and the county and the DNR were able to close off the whole launch area and treat it and eradicate them. So what infested the entire lake, and this is probably not the whole story, but Carver County AIS person was diving in the lake and 100 feet offshore found one single zebra mussel in the open lake. Now there likely were more than that, but that was the beginning. From that point on, then they expanded a lot over the years.
Thank you. Okay, so we touched a little bit on this earlier when we talked about how water clarity changes so much once a lake is infested with zebra mussels. How does the infestation of zebra mussels affect fishing?
I can speak to walleye fishing in particular. It's changed walleye fishing. With the clarity of water, sand was 8 to 9 feet, and now it's 14 to 15 foot of clarity. And so it's become more of an early morning or evening fish for walleyes, or unless it's a cloudy day with a slight breeze. So especially walleyes, it has affected fishing.
On Bay, I'm not seeing a big change. We certainly have the water clarity. I've been fishing Mille for a few years, for some years, since before all this started, and fishing for smallmouth bass in 50 to 20 feet of water. And I haven't sensed a difference there, other than once in a while there'll be a zebra mussel attached to a piece of a hook or a bait or a thing, that sort of thing. But I haven't. You'd think there'd be more change. I guess I'm more concerned that in the long run, the zebra mussels, with their filtration of the nutrients, that is going to have an impact down the road. But I don't know that we have felt it yet.
I don't know if Minnewashta has been impacted for fishing. I do know that Minnewashta is impaired for fishing at this time. And I don't completely understand that. That's a question of nutrients, and I suspect that zebra mussels contribute to that. But I don't have enough information. I do observe that there are a lot of fishermen, I should have said fisher people, I guess, on the lake. And I don't think that's changed. So it's still a very popular lake for fishing.
Yeah, I think Phil's comment that it's likely a longer term impact that you see is probably a good assumption to make. And in terms of like how the clarity might impact like your bite or where you choose to fish, I don't know as much about that. There is some research as well that's come out of the research center that looked at zebra mussel infested lakes and the size of young of the year walleye. And in zebra mussel lakes, they did find they tended to be smaller, and that has some implications for like later life and survival. It's like maybe in the size of, maybe what your catch will be in terms of if you're like a trophy fisher or something like that, and quantity. So I think there's some connections that can be made there too. But I agree. I think they're longer term. That research I think happened largely on some of the larger lakes like Mille. I forget the others that were part of that specific study, but some that I think maybe there's been some longer term infestation too.
Yeah, definitely when we get into the food web dynamics shifting, that's going to be a longer term thing. I don't think we have a good handle on that yet. Thank you all very much. Okay, so a couple of, okay. This one, are water pumps in the water for garden water systems clogged and damaged? Are they getting clogged and damaged? And if so, how can they be protected? So this is for our water pumps in the water getting clogged or damaged.
Well, I
Gosh, I
mentioned
don't. Oh,
earlier
go
that-
ahead, Kevin.
Sorry, go ahead, Megan.
So I was gonna say I don't know if I have a way to share a photo, but when we were out last year on zebra mussel safari on Big Lake and Lake Mitchell, which is where I live, one of the participants had just pulled their pump out, and many of the little holes were almost completely occluded with zebra mussels filling them in. So there is potential for damage, especially as you kind of strain the opening and how much water it can come in. That can put a lot of strain on the pump. I think the solution for you is to just pull it out and scrape it off from time to time. So don't just leave it in the lake unattended for the entire summer. And then, it'll probably be fine. But it was shocking how much was on that pump.
Kevin, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I don't. I was just going to say, I mentioned earlier that we had reports of pumps being clogged, and I don't have one, so I really don't have any other information.
And we moved our pump to the shoreline. We just don't leave it in. Just don't.
So this segues nicely into the next question. How have zebra mussel infestations affected boats or motors that are moored and not lifted? Same with some shoreline pipes.
I think it's a good idea to leave the lower unit out of the water. I think every little hole in the lower unit, I think they had something on Mille a number of years ago where the villagers get in there and of course they grow, and then it pretty much clogs up everything in the lower unit.
Okay. Okay, this is a
Hillary, if you'd like, I have the photo quick. If I'll share my screen if that's okay, and then folks can see what I was talking about with
yeah, absolutely.
the water pump. So this is the water pump. I'm in Sherburne County, so this is what it looked like when they had pulled it out while we were there. So you can see a lot of growth, not a lot of open space. There was the mussels that had settled in the pipe coming out of it and the attachment. So it was quite the sight to see.
Wow. Yep, that's pretty incredible. Okay, so switching gears a little bit. This might be a general question. I'm not quite sure, but what can we do about the lake providers who jump from North Star Lake on Monday to Turtle Lake on Tuesday? You know, some of these very rapid jumping vessels. What are some things we can do?
Well, on Minnewashta, we have inspection, and so that's one precaution. The other thing is the DNR requires lake inspectors to be registered and take responsibility through education. You know, I guess those are easy words to say and more difficult to put in motion, but I think those are the two key things that are going on that I know of.
I should
I
clarify
believe-
that question a little bit before we move forward. This is probably more regarding service providers, so
Yes.
docks and lifts. Yeah, just so that's what we're talking about.
I believe that I know they have to be trained and certified by DNR. And I believe they're supposed to show a sticker on their boat or their trailer that shows that they have been. And while this might not be easy, if you see somebody moving docks or boats or something that doesn't look right, ask them if they're certified. You know, but boy, we know that some of them are cowboys and they're running from lake to lake, and they probably aren't going to transport any live mussels, but certainly is a potential there to transport villagers. Good news is most of them don't have bait wells and live wells and all that sort of thing. But certainly potential there, but I don't know what there is to do except try to make sure those that are on your lake are trained and doing the right things. It takes kind of policing it as citizens, I think.
Yeah, and DNR does keep the list of certified lake service providers online. So you can find that. I think if you just Google like Minnesota DNR lake service provider, you can come to that page. And they're getting training on aquatic invasive species prevention. So maybe one of the first steps is to just make sure that you're hiring someone who's gone through the appropriate certifications for it. I know, I think Bill Granchis, who I think is maybe in the audience but couldn't join, has done some outreach. So I think about partnerships too and connecting, you know, with like your county AIS people or folks to help make connections to local lake service providers. And I think it's fine to ask them questions, you know, if you want to hire someone specifically, maybe say like, hey, what are the steps that you take? Like, how do you ensure that you're not spreading zebra mussels in the work that you do or other aquatic invasive species? I've heard of some providers who plan their work so that they're working on uninfested lakes first, and then we'll move on to infested waters. So I think, you know, lots of them are thinking of it, and they really want to do the right thing too. Yeah.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Okay. Let's see. We've covered some of this. Oh, this from Kathy. This is for you, Megan. How do we obtain a sampler for detection?
Oh, so if you're, I'm assuming this is just to do like early detection. So we have instructions that I can share that are just kind of how to build your own. DNR also has them with just fairly simple materials. I'll also say that zebra mussels, you know, they attach to most things, so you don't have to make something super scientific for it to be used as an early detection sampler. You could just use like a stretch of PVC tube, maybe drill a couple of holes in it and hang that off of a dock, and then, you know, just kind of check that monthly and see what there is. If the question is about the Zebra Mussel Safari research program, you can reach out to me if you'd like, and I can chat with you. We're still in the pilot phases, but maybe looking to add some lakes again for the 2024 season. So I think my email will get shared, so you can reach out to me about that.
Okay, thank you for that information. Let's see. There are a lot of questions. We're gonna talk about follow-up since I don't think we'll be able to get to everyone's. But this is a good a wrap-up question. So knowing what you know now, if you could go back in time, what would you do differently, or would you do anything differently?
I would say about 2015, we were hearing of a lake in the metro area that was owned by the homeowners. And they were able to put up a gate at the access during non-inspection hours. And we asked DNR about that. And of course, all the public accesses in Minnesota are open access, and we were denied. But therefore, although we had inspectors, volunteer and paid inspectors on our access pretty much every day, all day, probably starting 10 years ago, there were lots of hours when there was no one there. And if I could go back, I mean, I'm not sure I could change it, but that was too bad, because in my mind, DNR should have allowed that lake access to be closed to protect this. And we still, you know, there are many other bases out there that we're all looking down the gun barrel at, and we still have no way to basically make sure that all the boats are inspected, because that's how most of it's transferred. So I guess I would wish we could have done that, but I don't know what more you can do except what DNR allows you to do on your public access, and communicate with your members, the people that are on your lake, about the importance of draining their own boats when they're moving them around. Problem, I think, really is people coming in from other lakes that don't follow regulations. I think that's probably where the big problem is. And if you can't have somebody on the access all the time, how are you going to protect yourself?
We also ran into that with the DNR. They wouldn't close our access either. We have one public access on the lake. What we did do prior to being infected or infested, 3 years prior to that, through the Lake Association, we had volunteers that we scheduled on holidays and weekends, at least tried to cover the busy areas to do inspections. Back then, we could just do education, basically. We couldn't get in on a boat or stop a boat from going in, but we did our very best in educating everybody that came to the access about zebra mussels, and that was prior. We got them anyway 3 years later, but up front, we had a lot of volunteers on the public access.
One thing about the volunteers, that they have to be DNR trained as well. And there are restrictions about what they can do. They can't do the same thing that the inspectors can do. But we too had a big volunteer program before the state started providing the money to pay for the paid inspectors. But that's a really important program. If you don't have inspections going on, develop a volunteer inspection program and get in touch with your local DNR to get them trained. And I did that for a lot of years. If anybody out there wants to know about that, you can get to me through this organization. And I can tell you how we did that. Probably the same for the other fill.
Yep, absolutely.
I think in our case, what we could have or should have done differently was more education. We were already doing inspection at the launch. There are other launches, so this is only the public launch where the inspection was going on. And so an increase of education, not that we weren't doing it, we have a website and it was in our newsletters, but people have to read those. And so you, because we are now infested, it's easy to look back and say, what could you do differently? And I think it would have been a big step up in education to let people know the ramifications. And so.
Well, thank you all so much. This has just been a great discussion. Your thoughts are extremely appreciated. We did have a lot of questions, and I apologize we were not able to get through all of them, but on the final slide, as we do the wrap up, you will see an email address, so you can follow up with us with your question at info@itascawaters.org. You'll see that on the slide, and then there will be a follow-up email as well. Also included on that slide are the links that were mentioned earlier for additional resources. So want to thank our panelists and everyone who submitted questions so much again, and I'll pass things back over to you, Brian. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. And big thank you to our speakers, Megan, Kevin, Phil, and also for hosting Hillary. By the way, if you have questions that we didn't get to today before time ran out, as Hillary said, you can send them to info@itascawaters.org and they will be forwarded. Our next Water Wisdom program is coming up on April 4th, when we will learn about loon restoration in Minnesota. You can register at itascawaters.org. You can also go to itascawaters.org to register for another really cool webinar that is coming up tomorrow called Forecasting Lake Ice In and Ice Out Dates, hosted by none other than Sea Grant Director Dr. John Downing. Go to itascawaters.org, click on News Events, and then scroll down to the title. The program is free, but you will have to register, but that's very easy to do. If you'd like to watch today's program again or recommend it to your family or friends or neighbors, a recording of today's talk will soon be on our website, itascawaters.org, along with all the previous programs over the past 2 years and 2 months. We would really like to get your feedback, so please click on the survey link, which will be on screen, is on screen right now, down at the bottom right at the end of today's program. You will also be getting an email evaluation from Itasca Waters, so you can choose how you'd like to respond, but please respond. I'm Brian Whittemore, and thank you for being with us today.